section through the adrenal gland. Now, the first thing you should notice is, like many organs, the adrenal glands have a connective tissue membrane around. That's what this is. This is the capsule. And again, you see it around a lot of things: lymph nodes, thymus, spleen, and so on. Kidneys. Supports and protects the organ. So this is the capsule. That's fibrous connective tissue membrane. This region here is part of the cortex, adrenal cortex. All of this is cortex. And we get down to here. This is medulla. Now, the medulla, you can see, has a lot of blood vessels. That's what gives you this kind of pink color here, blood cells. So let's look at the medulla first. Now we're going back into the cortex here. So there's cortex up here. This region here is medulla. Lots of blood vessels, you can see, full of blood cells somewhere. And they produce probably the best known hormones associated with the adrenal gland: epinephrine and norepinephrine, which used to be called adrenaline and noradrenaline. Most people, you talk about adrenaline, they know what you're talking about. If you mention epinephrine, they may not know. It's the same thing, just a different name. Epinephrine and norepinephrine are chemically very similar in structure, and also their actions or functions are basically much the same. And these are produced by cells in the medulla called chromaffin cells. That's on your handout there, toward the bottom of the page, or sort of the middle of the page. So epinephrine and norepinephrine, you can see, they produce effects similar to stimulation by the sympathetic division of the autonomic nervous system. Because in fact, norepinephrine is a neurotransmitter released by the cells that stimulate the organs in the sympathetic division of the autonomic nervous system, the so-called postganglionic or postsynaptic fiber. So what do? They increase the heart rate, they increase your metabolic rate, increase the blood pressure by stimulating vasoconstriction. So a lot of the same effects we would see with sympathetic stimulation. Okay, so again, they increase the heart rate, they increase the metabolic rate, increase blood pressure by stimulating vasoconstriction of the smooth muscle and blood vessel walls. Both epinephrine and norepinephrine. And when you were studying the autonomic nervous system, ANP1, you're probably told that the effects of sympathetic stimulation tend to be more generalized, or body-wide, and are of longer duration than those of the parasympathetic. Did you hear about that? Anybody mention that? Yes, no, don't care? Okay. Why? I'm not asking why you don't care. I'm asking why. Why are the effects of sympathetic stimulation more generalized, body-wide, and longer lasting than a parasympathetic? What's a neurotransmitter released by the parasympathetic fibers at the tissues, the tissue synapses? It's the same one released by somatic motor neurons. What is it? Acetylcholine. Acetylcholine. Okay? Acetylcholine is released by somatic motor neurons. Diffused across the synaptic cleft. Synaptic cleft is a little gap between the motor neuron and the muscle cell. It's picked up by receptors in the muscle cell membrane, and it stimulates the muscle cell, assuming it has ATP, to contract. Now, once the hormone stops being released, the acetylcholine, why does contraction stop? Because there's an enzyme produced by those cells that break down the acetylcholine. It's called acetylcholinesterase. So it stops the effect of acetylcholine. You don't have that for epinephrine. And we just saw that epinephrine is not released by the tissue synapses of the sympathetic division of the nervous system to stimulate tissues, but also here by the chromaffin cells directly into the blood, circulates all the way around the body. So a much more generalized body-wide effect versus the parasympathetic, which usually only released there at the synapse. Anyway, these cells, chromaffin cells, produce both epinephrine and norepinephrine. Effects basically very similar. Okay, let's look at the cortex. Now, the three regions of the cortex I'd like you to identify, and each region associated with different hormones. The outermost region, most superficial, adjacent to the capsule, which we see here, this region here. In this case, the cells are kind of oval or round clusters. If you got a good imagination, they almost look like the glomerulus in the renal corpuscle. I'd say good imagination. Okay? That's probably where it gets started. See these things right here, here. This is called the zona glomerulosa. That's right. Up toward the top of the page here, okay, under adrenal gland cortex hormones, everybody see that? The zona glomerulosa cells. Now, the class of hormones are called mineralocorticoids because they adjust mineral or ion levels in body fluids. But the major human mineralocorticoid is aldosterone, which we've talked about in reference to the kidneys. Aldosterone, remember, stimulates the kidneys to reclaim more sodium ions from the renal filtrate, and in doing so, reclaim more water. They build up the blood volume, reduce urine production, and thus elevate blood pressure. So this is the effect of aldosterone. And again, the class of hormones, mineralocorticoids, if you're asked the class of hormones produced by these cells in zona glomerulosa of the adrenal cortex. If you're asked the major mineralocorticoid in humans, your answer should be aldosterone. Again, we've talked a lot about that already. Okay. The middle region then of the cortex, now the cells basically form like columns, like you see here. So this region, you can see below there, it's called the zona fasciculata, like fascicles. When you were studying muscles, remember, the muscle cells are often in bundles called fascicles. Well, here we have cells basically in bundles or fascicles, roughly parallel one another. So this is called the zona fasciculata. The major class of hormones produced by these cells, the zona fasciculata of the adrenal cortex, are called glucocorticoids. And again, the major one in humans is called cortisol. Okay, this has to do with lipid and protein breakdown or catabolism. Also gluconeogenesis, that is the formation of glucose from non-carbohydrate sources. But very important, sometimes called a stress hormone, it aids the body in resisting stress. What it does basically is depress the body's inflammatory response, which is part of your immune response. So it basically depresses inflammation and depresses your immune response. And often when you have a skin rash, what do you take? Like hydrocortisone, okay? It's a weak concentration, basically you apply topically for the rash. And now, of course, they have drugs you can take orally, give you that beautiful complexion, okay, and they talk about it. And then what do they say? Check with its prescription, fortunately. Check with your doctor, make sure you don't have a chronic infection like tuberculosis or some fungal infection, because if you do, okay, that could severely impair your body's ability to fight the infection. You could die of TB or some other chronic infection. So you look very good in your coffin, you have beautiful skin, okay, but not going to do you much good. So that's why you got to be careful with these things, because these concentrations of this stuff can really knock down your immune system, knock down your inflammatory response. And again, this is cortisol, and this is one of the glucocorticoids. Glucocorticoid, again, is a class of hormones. Cortisol is a major human glucocorticoid produced by these cells of the zona fasciculata. All right, the inner region, now the cells kind of break up into a reticulum, or a network, and this is called the zona reticularis. And these cells produce androgens, which are male sex hormones in both sexes, by the way, and also small amounts of estrogens, which are female sex hormones. It's produced in both sexes. And females, the androgens basically aid in libido, what we call sex drive. And when a woman goes through menopause, and her ovaries not only shut down egg production, but also sex hormone production, the body will convert these androgens produced by the zona reticularis cells of the adrenal cortex into male sex hormones. The male sex hormones, androgens, into estrogens. Basically bring up the hormone level a little bit, but not as much as was produced by the ovaries. And that's why the woman often goes through, when she's going through menopause, she has these hot flashes, night sweats, and often violent mood swings. Because basically what the body is doing, it's coming off a drug. It's a drug withdrawal. The body's been used to high levels of estrogens, and suddenly it's gone. It's like trying to quit smoking. You know how easy that is. Okay? Your body wants the nicotine, and suddenly you're depriving it, and you pay for it. That's the same thing here. Your body's used to high levels of estrogen, and then suddenly the levels fall off dramatically, and now you have these severe symptoms as a result. The hot flashes, okay, the mood swings, night sweats, and so on.